Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Emmett-Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof, the 10th of April 2024. My first video today was restricted, which is not unusual, but I didn't try and faff around and put it on my other channel. Just please share those videos if they do get restricted, because it means they don't get put on the algorithm. They will get, no adverts, no algorithm to send them out there. They just rely on, I guess, subscribed members to check them out. Certainly less so than usual videos. Anyway, moving on, we'll start in the military aid. Well, I think this is just going to be a military aid video and equipment video. We'll start with the US State Department approving a potential foreign military aid sale to Ukraine for the sustainment and overhaul of their Hawk Phase 3 medium-range air defense missile launchers. And that package is worth $138 million US dollars. This is concerning the fairly outdated Hawk missile system that's been in use, well, in its earlier iterations since sort of Vietnam War, 1960s and whatnot. It's been updated, and a number of nations around the world use this or have them in their stocks. And there was a thought that at the beginning of the war, you could actually generate an awful lot of missile systems and stocks by going around the world and gathering these up and getting them to Ukraine. I know Trentelenko used to talk about this quite a bit. The Ukrainians do have the use of a number of these. I know Spain's given some of these, other nations as well, no doubt. This is good news. When you provide Ukraine with weaponry, it's always important that they get the ability to have that weaponry maintained by experts, or get your guys trained up by the experts, because they require constant tinkering with to keep them in working order. The US State Department has approved that for Ukraine for the long-term support and upgrades for one Hawk Phase 3 SAM systems, or that could be the iHawk, I'm not sure. And the One Hawk, an older system, will receive significant refurbishment and system overhauls. Equipment will come from US Army stocks, foreign donations, and COTS, which is commercial off the shelf. At least 5 US government and 15 contractor representatives will be deployed to Europe to support the program. Colby Badwar then looks at it and said, something I missed in the financial year 2024 State and Foreign Operations Act. It includes $300 million in foreign military financing appropriated to the Countering Russian Influence Fund. $138 million of that is being used to finance the emergency foreign military sale to Ukraine. So that's actually already been funded outside of military aid packages and whatnot. They've been able to get that in on something else. I guess good news for the Ukrainians there. And the Americans helping out here in this way. Like I was talking, and I've been talking about this for a couple of days, that certain nations will be helping Ukraine in ways that don't always appear on military aid packages. Here's a big amount of equipment and it's costing this much money. I know the US does this an awful lot with the provision of intelligence, for example, and sanctions enforcement and twisting people's arms around the world. All of this kind of diplomacy and other work can't be quantified in terms of financial contribution to Ukraine. And so we need to remember that with the US. I will slag off the US for not giving the $60 billion aid package, and I'll continue to do so because it's freaking important, and it's just a few people that are doing that, but the US will be trying to mitigate that by doing all sorts of other stuff. And here's another thing that they have done, which probably won't turn up on a evaluated military aid package. So earlier today, UCENTCOM announced that last week the US supplied, I don't think this is for the first time either, Ukraine with 5,000 AK-47s, machine guns, sniper rifles, RPG-7s, and over 500,000 rounds of 7.62 ammunition. The weapons have been seized for the Iranian regimental guard, is that what they're called? Smugglers by the US Navy over the past 3 years. In other words, as the Iranians have tried to get these weapons to the Houthis, I think it might say it here, the munitions were being transferred from the IRGC to the Houthis in Yemen in violation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2216. So that they have been confiscated, and you might as well give them to Ukraine. And that if that hasn't happened previously, then it's been talked about for an awful long time. But I'm sure that they've had hauls of this stuff previously as well. But I don't know. Good news anyway. And we're going to go on to missiles now. My latest for the insider, says Colby Budwa, on the missile balance in the war in Ukraine. Russia has the advantage, and we need to change that. Additional Storm Shadows, Scalp EGs, Taurus, ATACMS, SLAM ERs are all desperately needed. I get frustrated that the UK, for example, and France have given Storm Shadows and Scalp EGs to Ukraine. And I maintain that the way to win this war is predominantly by hammering the Russians with distance munitions, so you don't have to send your troops onto the front line to get attrited away and die. The easiest way to win this war is by having a phenomenal amount of missiles of differing types, all the way from sort of HIMARS up to ATACMS, cruise missiles, so on and so forth. And you just absolutely hammer the Russians from a distance. Now, when the UK first gave Storm Shadows, I don't know why, and we still, I don't think, have any orders on the books for replacement Storm Shadow missiles. The idea that they're going to move on to other missiles and this and that, but I'd be like, right, UK is going to take responsibility for Storm Shadow missiles, cruise missiles. You guys can do other things. We're just going to do missiles and an absolute bucket load of them. So I'm going to put an order for 1,000 missiles in to MBDA. We're going to try and get the unit cost down for these, try and make them as cheap as possible for the UK taxpayer. And we are just going to give an absolute bucket load of cruise missiles to Ukraine. And they can use these ad nauseum on the Russians. That would be cool, but no, we just give a few here, a few there, don't put any orders in, and it all seems to be without looking at the long term. And the problem is, in order to effect a change down the line, you need to put things in place up here. So it's no good to say, oh, we'll put an order in now, and then 6 months later they might start getting some of these in. It's just really, really frustrating. Now, we're actually going to go to missiles now. I'm going to talk about Patriot missiles. Here we have Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, as I've reported over the last few days, has been calling for more Patriots for Ukraine and warns that Russia aims to bomb the city of Kharkiv into the ground. We need an overview, she says, of all Patriot systems in Europe and worldwide to see where we can quickly deliver something to Ukraine. Okay. Good news. Interesting. Apparently, Germany is working with Ukraine and EU partners and setting up a special fund to purchase Patriot systems, says German aid to Ukraine, that are worldwide in service and with different nations and deliver them to Ukraine. This was announced today by Baerbock. Fantastic. Someone says, which countries would come into question? Which country has Patriots that it could give away? Germany aid to Ukraine replies to that question. Jordan and Qatar come to my mind. Germany has already bought back their Gepards from Qatar and delivered them to Ukraine. And Germany and the US have also bought back Cheetahs from Jordan. Cheetahs are they're a version of the Gepard that was upgraded with the radar capability by the Dutch. Actually, Gepard means cheetah, but the cheetah in English variant is a slightly different variant of the Gepard. Anyway, from Jordan, and are about to deliver them to Ukraine. Interesting, they're about to deliver them. That'd be good news. Wouldn't Jordan and Qatar have to be offered something else as a substitute? Has already worked before with Egypt, Qatar, and Jordan. Answers German aid to Ukraine. So there could be some interesting cooperations taking place between Middle Eastern countries, Germany, US, so on and so forth. Some big news on a Patriot production this morning. So a lot of this is going to come down to, a lot of Patriot provision will come down to how quickly Raytheon or their RTX or whatever they're known as can produce those systems and the missiles. Because if you're getting Patriot systems from other countries to go to Ukraine, then those countries will want to order the replacements from from the manufacturers. So Thomas Laliberty, president of Raytheon Land, Air and Air Defense Systems, says that they have the capacity to build one Patriot battery per month. This is currently underutilized, though, as they have Switzerland's order of 5 batteries in production right now, plus some replacement contracts for the assets transferred to Ukraine. They expect another 12 batteries will be on contract within the next 18 months, though. It's astounding that the Biden administration did not use USAI funds to take advantage of this spare capacity by placing orders for additional Patriot batteries for Ukraine. I mean, this is similar to the Storm Shadow missile point I was just making. He goes on to talk about the numbers that they can make. A PAC-3 MSE is currently a 500 per year and will reach 650 by 2027. Those are the missiles. And we finally learned that the rate for PAC-2 GMT is 240 a year, reaching 420 in 2027. So on and so forth. Lots of missile manufacturing data there. I'm not sure what the relevance of Mitsubishi is. But I think, do they make Patriots themselves? I think that's where they got some of the Patriot missiles from previously, was from Japan. April 9th. So Colby says President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida from Japan will discuss expanding defense co-production at this week's state visit. US officials say that expanding Patriot missile production could be on the agenda, as well as establishing other new manufacturing lines. Japan has already agreed to sell Patriot missiles back to the US Army to backfill stocks that were being sent to Ukraine. So that could be why Mitsubishi's production capacity is under question there. Fabian Hoffman builds on this idea of this underutilization of defense capabilities, or capacity, sorry, with saying the West's most significant mistake in this war has been the consistent underutilization of its vast industrial strength. I mean, people often talk about that we're 25 times bigger GDP as allies than Russia, and so therefore this war is conceptually an easy win. We just need the political will to actually get on and do it. And that is what Russia's working hard on. And they've undermined the political will in the US, and they've undermined the political will in Hungary and Slovakia. They're starting on Bulgaria, or like at least that's manifesting itself at the moment. You've got Serbia, you've got maybe movements in France and other countries, AfD in Germany. You have the fomenting of this disunity in Europe that is done by Russia, that is incredibly successful, I think. But it just takes will. Like, if we can overcome that and actually get those orders in and spend that money, then we can win this war, which will be for the benefit of the global security and European security, and the US hegemony. So he says underutilization of vast industrial strength, which is evident in both Europe and North America. This is just another example. So he's talking about what Colby Badwar said about the underutilization of Patriot manufacturing. Russia can only emerge victorious as long as we continue to fear our own power. We're just not kicking into that next gear. We have moved up some gears, but I'd say we're in like third gear, and we need to get into fifth gear. We're still in third gear going, yeah, okay, this is war, but, we've got elections coming, or not too sure, or and that's allowing Russia, who are in fifth gear at the moment, motoring along in their movement towards a war footing and a war economy, and we're not matching them. This is Joseph Borrell, the Vice President of the EU, who's been quite strong in his rhetoric at the moment. So basically, Europe is at war, or we need to be prepared for war. We are not prepared for war. We need to be. He said, I spoke to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, and he is desperately seeking for 7 Patriot batteries to protect his country. It should be inconceivable that we're not able to provide them, given that the Western armies have about 100 batteries of Patriot. Yeah. Agreed there. The Kiev Independent, well, actually, it's not. It's talking about a Wall Street Journal article, but actually, Kiev Independent is a good summary, so we'll dip into this. There's an article about how US-made drones are actually performing fairly poorly in Ukraine. I think there's going to be an awful lot of focus on drones from every nation, looking at this, going, actually, what are the best drones to use in these wars? Who makes the best ones? What are the countermeasures? What are the countermeasures? So on and so forth. So small drones made by US startups have performed poorly on Ukrainian battlefields, being regarded as expensive and glitchy by their users, according to the Wall Street Journal today. Unmanned systems have become a key capability for both sides of the Russia-Ukraine war, as Kyiv is ramping up domestic production and imports of drones. The US has supplied Ukraine with a number of smaller American-made drones, but they have failed to make a meaningful impact, the journal wrote. Drone company executives, Ukrainian officials, and former US defense officials told the outlet that these unmanned aircraft are often expensive, glitchy, and difficult to repair. They're also reportedly susceptible to Russian electronic warfare systems, which makes them fly off course and get lost. Quote, the general reputation for every class of US drone in Ukraine is that they don't work as well as other systems, said Adam Bry, the CEO of Skydio company that supplied Ukraine with hundreds of its own drones. Kyiv has been increasingly turning to cheaper Chinese drones, such as off-the-shelf hardware from SZ technology. Ukrainian companies are relying on Chinese components for domestic drone production, according to the journal. China is also a crucial source of drones for Russia. Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov admitted last October that the majority of drones that Russia currently uses come from Chinese imports. US-made drones had at least some successes, for example, in investigations of Russian war crimes, search and rescue operations, or scouting, the Wall Street Journal wrote. Zelensky signed a decree in February creating a separate branch of Ukraine's armed forces dedicated to drones. Strategic Industries Deputy Minister Hanna Hovodzia said that Ukraine has the capacity to produce 150,000 drones every month and may be able to produce 2 million drones by the end of the year. Wow, incredible. So I think that may sound bad for American drone manufacturers, but actually going forward, this is almost like the scientific method. It's performance feedback revisions, how evolution works. Performance feedback revision, performance feedback revision, and you need to understand what the needs are to then build that into your next iteration of that, and then it will get better and better. So I've no issues with the idea that American drone manufacturers will just vastly improve. One thing will be the price point there, because Chinese drones have that manufacturing advantage in terms of economies of scale, but certainly a lot that the US can do to improve what they're doing. Bold account. Sorry, there's a phone going off somewhere. Olaf Scholz says, Zelensky says, and this is incredibly interesting. Brian Ivey was saying something on one of the threads yesterday, which I completely agree with, which is that Zelensky said over the last couple of days that without US aid, they are not going to win this war, essentially, which is a really risky thing to say, because it could entrench some of those intransigent American lawmakers who are already against Zelensky to being even more so. But I was then saying, I think the reason he's saying that is because he's freaking desperate, right? I think you're seeing Zelensky start to say things a bit more boldly and a bit more riskily, and it's probably a reflection of, one, where Ukraine are at the moment and everything is on a knife edge, and two, he's probably just under a huge amount of pressure domestically, politically. With 2 years into the war, his popularity is going to be going down. People are thinking, why are we still at war? Why haven't we won this? They were, honestly, the Ukrainians, Zelensky, by all accounts, I think according to Simon Schuster, who wrote the book about him recently, saying that he genuinely expected them to prevail after it started looking quite good at the beginning of the war. I don't think there was a realization of how big Russian stocks are and how much they were willing to lose personnel and stocks, and that's kind of what that's a mistake Zelensky made by his own admission. He said, one, we're expecting to advance 30 kilometers a day, and two, we thought that the Russians would capitulate on losing so many people, and they didn't. They basically yeah, we don't care, we've got more people. And I think those are pretty massive. That the idea that the Russians would give up on losing so many people, if that's what you're factoring, you're planning on, then your plans are going to go wrong. So I think that could be partly where Zelensky went wrong, and it could be where Zelensky's gone wrong with his idea of how this war was going to play out. He's now at a point where 2 years later he's suffering psychologically. He's going to be suffering. The stress will be insane. and the world seems to be unable to properly kick into gear to help. It's like the third gear, like I said earlier. Like the US have stalled. They're idling. No, they're not even idling. They've stalled at the side of the motorway, and they are unable to restart the engine. They need some jump leads, but those jump leads aren't going to get there until November 2024 by the looks of it. And so you got Mike Johnson, who's run away with the frickin' alternator, um, and he left on the side of the road. So the frustration there then comes out and like, we're going to lose this if we don't get that aid from the US. And he says, and then he's starting to be quite open here with possibly, I don't know if this is ill-advised or not, or maybe he's just calling Scholz's bluff, which is like this is nothing to do with X and Y, but this is why Scholz hasn't provided the turrets. As far as I understand, Scholz believes that, as he is a representative of a non-nuclear state, this is the only weapon that Germany has. It is the most powerful one, turrets. In other words, it's not so much about the escalation that a lot of people were talking about, but actually it's all that Germany has, and they don't want to give that away either from their own stocks in terms of their own ability to defend themselves, or to give their very best weapon to Ukraine, such that you might fire some dub ones into Russia or into occupied territories, and the Russians might get a hold of it, and they've got hold of Germany's best weapon. I don't know. I don't know if that stands up, but that's what Zelensky is saying. So Zelensky says that Scholz wants the missiles to defend Germany, which is not the version of events given to the German public, and that's in a Politico article. So, I think that's very interesting. Ukraine Batmap says, so why don't they purchase more Taurus? The company was offering Taurus orders for Germany recently, and now they've stopped production because Scholz and his government don't want to order more of the weapon, so they don't have enough of, and it's the most important one. So maybe it's not just the number of the weapons, but the idea it's their very best weapon, and they don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. But it's a very, very cautious approach to the war. When Scholz is saying how important this war is, and you're not giving the thing that will be most eagerly accepted and most effectively used by the side that you want to prevail, it's kind of weird. German aid to Ukraine, talking about German aid, says according to provisional figures provided by the German government, arms exports worth 4.9 billion euros were authorised in the first quarter of 2024 from Germany. Of this, 3.5 billion euros, so 72% of it, are intended for Ukraine, and this, which so far shows a considerable increase in arms exports. So that's to say that Germany is really ramping up its arms production and export, and B, they're doing that predominantly on the back of stuff going to Ukraine. In other words, they are very much involved in helping Ukraine quite significantly. Indeed, German aid to Ukraine again adds some things that have now been delivered. We've known about these pledged before, but just that they've found their way to Ukraine. Interesting that 24 outboard motors are on there, something they've been asking for big time. Infrared devices, 70 of them, 30 frequency range extensions for anti-drone devices, million rounds of firearm ammunition, 6,000 shells, 155mm shells. Got assault rifles, sniper rifles, assault rifles, more of them, blasting caps, detonators, mine plows, mobile remote-controlled protected demining devices, demining tanks, 2 of them, one ATTC command vehicle, Bronco, 30 RQ-35 Hydrogen drones. They're pretty decent drones, and 16 Vector drones. We've looked at them briefly previously. So that's good stuff that's found its way to Ukraine. There's that Wall Street Journal one. I knew I had that somewhere. Right, Ukraine's parliament. I think this is very significant and a good move from Ukraine. Some people might call it a bit controversial, but for minor criminals, where Ukraine desperately need to mobilise, you might as well dip into the prison population before your own non-prison population, right? I think that seems to be a sensible idea. We've seen Russia use this, but take it to like the full-on level. But Ukraine's parliament has passed today, on its first reading, a bill that permitted military service to citizens convicted of minor offences, said the bill author. This does not include those convicted under serious and violent charges such as murder, sexual violence, or crimes against national security. The bill has to pass a second reading and be signed by the president before it becomes law. So that would be really good if it could release a number of new boots on the ground for the Ukrainian armed forces. As far as the Russians are concerned with their mobilization, there will be no mobilization in May under any circumstances, says the head of Russian State Duma Defense Committee Kartopolov. And yet, what we have from the UK intelligence concerning Russian conscription, they continue to conscript soldiers. So that's what they do every year, that constant number that comes through. And they signed that decree for 150,000 recently. So each spring and autumn, the spring conscription commenced on April the 1st. Around 150,000 soldiers from 18 to 30 age group are to be conscripted this spring, which is consistent with the numbers conscripted previously. So it's a huge number of troops that the Russians can get hold of just on their normal yearly basis, but they can't be supposedly sent to war. They have to be used within, say, Russia, maybe into Belarus for training or whatever. These conscripts will serve for 12 months in all branches of Russia's military forces, but are currently not employed in combat roles in Ukraine. Conscripts are employed in garrisons across Russia. In land units, they generally form a battalion separate from the battalion staffed by contract service soldiers. Some conscript soldiers likely serve in Russia adjacent to the Ukraine border in units providing border security. Russian forces in Ukraine are staffed by contract service soldiers and some reservists mobilized in late 2022. Conscript soldiers are commonly put under pressure to enlist as contract soldiers and would then be liable for service in Ukraine. There is likely to be some reluctance among Russian authorities to risk combat casualties among conscript soldiers, which would likely be unpopular. Casualties among volunteer soldiers are more tolerated by society. At the beginning of the war, there were some incidences, I believe, if I remember correctly, of conscripts actually being in Ukraine when they shouldn't have been in Ukraine, and that was somewhat controversial. Russia seeks to recruit around 400,000 contract service personnel in 2024. This is to sustain its forces in Ukraine, which have suffered huge losses, and support its announced plans to increase the size of the armed forces to 1.32 million this year and 1.5 million subsequently. Now, whether they'll be able to get 400,000 on top of conscription from people who haven't already volunteered, I don't know how they're going to do that. Some kind of forced mobilization, you would have thought. It's just kind of wait and see. They've announced they're not going to do it in May. There were these thoughts that it was going to be done by June. Maybe it's going to be, we won't do it in May. We definitely won't do it in May. June the 1st comes along. We're doing it. I don't know what the situation is, but Russia will certainly want to bring a whole load more troops to the front line. Of course, as I always say, the ramifications of that would be taking men out of society so that jobs go, and you already got a labour shortage, so that will force wages to go up, which then forces inflation, which then makes everything more expensive, which then affects budgets, which means your expenditures are going sky high. Are your incomes matching that rise? And then, of course, you get brain drains and social upheaval and all sorts of stuff going on. And then you are also spending more because not only is everything more expensive anyway because wages have to go up, but the public sector has to spend more on wages for soldiers, right? So then having to 400,000 people you're going to have to give wages for, and you are having to pay for those soldiers who have died and been injured that those soldiers are replacing. So you still have to pay pensions and all sorts of stuff out on for those, and it's just this cycle of more and higher costs for the state. And yes, you're getting onto a war footing, but it's just not a sound economic, foundation for Russia to flourish. So, yeah, I think it's going to be challenging for the Russians, but I guess sunk cost fallacy. They're in this for the long haul. They can't get out now. So there you go. Anyway, let me know what you think. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.